What we are trying to point out is that, number one, it's going to be like 92 degrees here in Phoenix today. So it reminded us that the seasons are changing. And when it comes to UTVs and where you ride, where you drive, and how you do it, it might be a seasonal change on where you're going to take your UTV and the things you want to do to set the thing up for the next direction that you're going to go, and also what you're going to want to do to prep it. So seasonal changes when it comes to your UTV. Now, out here in Arizona, usually it's UTVs in the winter, and as soon as it gets like today, you're going to go boats, and you're going boats to Lake Havasu or Parker or wherever it is. Woohoo! But a lot of us don't jump from UTV to boat. We go UTV to UTV. We just change them where we're going to go. So maybe you're from a local standpoint, maybe you're in the dunes all season in the winter, but as soon as it turns into summer, then you're going to go up into the mountains like Flagstaff or Prescott for us. Other parts of the country, in California, you might also be dunes. You might end up going up to Big Bear. You might go to Mammoth or Reno, Nevada, or whatever, higher mountain elevations, get away from the heat. On the East Coast, you might be heater inside your closed cab, whatever you're driving, in the snow, maybe even tracks, which, Steve, you dealt with tracks the other day.
I did.
Yeah, we might have to talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
But you get out of the winter, and all of a sudden you're going to go back into summer, and you're going to go trail riding. You're going to go trail riding, and you're going to go maybe mudding. So there's big differences between the directions that you run your UTV when it comes to seasons. Now, what we have the most experience with is what we're going to start with.
Tried to get him.
And that is going to be going from desert high speed and dunes to mountain trail elevation. There's a lot to change there. Number one, the obvious. We're going to go sand tire to a dirt tire. But I'm going to stay out of the obvious, and we're going to go into a little bit of the prep that you should think about when you're working on it. Both of these vehicles have been in the sand for the winter season. They're here getting all of their work done. You know what they're going to do probably next week? Not go to the sand, because they're going to end up going up an elevation, because right now, 90 degrees around here, it's going to go up into the mountains. We're going to go trail riding. So some of the things that all UTVs should probably see when it comes to prep. What if you are going from sand to mountain? What do you want to change on your car? First, you're going to want to check a few things on it. Number one, double check all of the radius rod joints. This might be a bad example because it's a Super ATV. Let's go back to these. Chase, on here, you're going to want to check rod ends on all of these because they can be loose. Make sure this is up. I'll check it. Let's see what this one looks like. Tire, we got shocks off of it. Typically, you're going to grab a tire, you're going to shake it top to bottom. Oh, look at what I found. We did not even plan this at all, Steve. You know what happens when you don't check any of the stuff on your car?
It's going to fall off.
There it is. So, take a look. Right here. Chase, can you actually see up in there good enough? All right, watch that rod end shake back and forth. Can you guys even hear that?
Oh, yeah.
That's a pretty good one. So, the rod ends on these radius rods are worn out from the season, and that's a typical thing that you're going to want to check because it's a high wearing item. It sees a ton of load. It doesn't matter if it's a bone stock radius rod here or if it's an aftermarket one like this with rod ends on it. It doesn't matter whose rod ends, whose radius rods are on that thing. Because if you do not check the radius rods like I am right now, I will guarantee you one thing, Matt, what's going to happen?
It's going to fall off.
That's right. So another thing that you can do, if you don't know where the rattle is, let's say we're all wondering where this noise is, you can put your finger on the hardware and you can put your finger on the body of the rod end, and I guarantee you, you will feel in your finger where the loose part is because your finger can tell the difference between the body and the hardware that doesn't move, and it will tell you where it's loose. If you go forward to back, usually you're going to check whether the hub bearing is bad. If you go up and down on the rear, you're going to find any of the radius rods. So let's lift this up. You can see. Funny, but thanks, Mitch. This side doesn't have anything that's worn out. It's only the other side. So just because you have one side worn out doesn't mean that the other one could have a problem. But I guarantee you, if you don't check both sides, then at least one thing is going to happen. And what is that, Steve?
It's gonna fall off.
That's right. If you don't check it, you're done.
It'll fall off.
Let's go to the front. Other things you guys want to check when you're going from season to season? You need to make sure you're looking at all the pivot points on all the control arms. That's going to be bushings, upper and lower. You're going to want to check all the steering components, and you're going to want to check upper and lower ball joints. So let's do that real quick. So really quick, by shaking it back and forth, the only thing that I can feel on this car is a little bit of steering. I can feel some movement right here. I don't know if you can see that, Chase. It's a very small amount.
Very little.
But that's something that I probably wouldn't be changing at this level, but it's something that you're gonna want to watch, because if you don't check it on a regular basis, Matt, what happens?
It's gonna fall off.
That's right. So on this car, we've checked rear radius rod joints. We've checked rear hubs by going front to back on the hubs. Steve, what else have we checked?
We checked loads and rods, but my question is, so if someone's stock rack was out, what could they do to fix that, Justin?
Oh, thank you for the shameless plug. Let's go over here. We did not even prep this, I promise.
I try and find it every time I can get.
Thanks, Steve.
You got
But
it.
right here, Chase, would be billet race racks. So if you have any steering problems on your Polaris or on your X3, then we have race racks that'll take care of all that worn out stuff. Another thing that we can shamelessly plug right into, Steve, watch this,
You're welcome, Justin.
is we have billet race racks for a Polaris General XP, as well as Polaris General Standard Early Model. Matt, check out the surprised look on his face. This is because I didn't tell you that we had them, right, Matt?
Right? And I get these questions a lot.
Okay, so we now currently have the XP, the early General billet race rack, and we have XP General, or General XP racks in stock. So back to things that we want to check on this. So we've checked rear hub bearings, we've checked rear radius rods, we have checked the pivot points in the front, so front control arm bushings. Usually you're going to see an obvious thing in the front bushings. It's going to clunk back and forth inside the mount. Upper lower ball joints, if you grab a tire and move vertically, you're going to feel ball joints. If you move the tire vertically, grabbing the top and bottom and moving it, and you feel something moving, it could be upper or lower ball joints, or it could be the hub bearing. The way you know the difference is, again, grab your finger, Chase, and put your finger between two things that aren't going to move. So if it's a hub bearing, you want to touch the rotor and you want to touch the lower control arm. If the bearing in the hub is the problem, you're going to see the rotor and the arm are going to space apart, and you're going to feel that with your finger. If it is a ball joint, you're going to put your finger right here. Chase, you can actually see this finger right here. You're going to put your finger between the spindle and the upper arm. See the finger right here, Chase?
Got it. Get it.
Okay, got it. And then you're going to shake it, and you're going to see if you got some movement. You do not have to have the shocks off to do this. Just make sure it's jacked up to where the tires are off the ground, so you have the movement and the ability to grab the tire without it sitting on the ground with load on it. So shocks can be on it. Do we have any shocks on that one? We can do the same thing?
Before we move from this one, Justin, I got a
Okay, what do you
question,
got,
because
Steve?
I get this question all the time and it's not in the feed. How do you check axles? Like, what's the best way to check them if you're gonna go from there?
So
Is
it's
it by
actually
plunging it?
a really good question, because
I get that all the time.
There's almost no way to check the axle without taking the boots off and looking on the inside. Usually, yeah, let's go to the back of this again. I'm not sure if we can spin. How about this one? So since this is off the ground, if you spin can you pull it out of Matt, can you put it in neutral? If you spin the assembly when it's jacked up off the ground, and you can hear noise or clunking, is that neutral? Nope. Keep going. I'll get it for you.
It's got
There
a
you go.
fancy thing
Park.
up here.
Nope. Oh, it's on the ground in the front and four-wheel drive. So never mind.
Okay.
We'll grab another one.
I didn't even do
What you want to do is spin the wheel and tire, and if you can feel the axle clunking on the way as it spins around, then that's a good sign that you've got axle issues and you should address them, either buy new ones or service and prep them. When it comes to race car stuff, we typically are not going to feel the problem by rotating it. We're going to have to pull the boots off and inspect it. If we're going to pull the boots off and inspect it, then we're already 90% of the way through the work, so we're just going to end up changing everything and throwing grease in it. If you've got a low horsepower car, like stock, usually axles aren't an issue. If you've got a high horsepower car and a lot of traction, like a big paddle, then I would be going through axles and looking at them every year. So we talked about this one more time. In the back, we got radius rods. We checked those. Talked about axles, rotate them. We've got rear hubs. We've got front hubs. We've got front A-arm or at least suspension pivot points. Check hardware, check bushings. We've also got steering, checking the rack. Another thing that you want to check, probably not on this one because it's got brand new everything. How about this one? You're going to want to check sway bar links. These are stock, but one way to check sway bar links is by tipping the vehicle side to side. If you do one side left to right, then it loads those links both directions and you're going to find one that's loose. Maybe if they're worn out or low quality rod ends, you're going to find it squeaking. That squeak is a telltale sign. You can also find out which rod end it is by making it squeak and then touching it with your fingers. Sometimes it'll go quiet when you touch it on both sides. Another thing that's very, very true when it comes to sway bar links is if you don't check this stuff quite often, then I guarantee you one thing. Matt, what's going to happen?
It's gonna fall off.
Definitely going to fall off. You guys, belts don't last forever. If you want to leave them on there forever, they definitely will blow up. So on a regular basis, certainly every single seasonal change, you should be pulling that outside cover off this thing. You should be changing that belt out. But in addition to that, you should be blowing it out with compressed air. Make sure you have no dust and debris in there. All that dust and debris gums up parts that should be moving. Parts that move keep belts alive. As soon as parts start getting gummed up, then belts blow up. Shock adjustments. Let's talk about shocks after you've changed the belt, you've blown out the clutch, you don't have any worn out parts in the clutch that need to be addressed. And I'm not talking to, I'm not covered the obvious, you guys. If you've got a driveline that vibrates, then change it. You've got tires that are worn out, then change them. You've got an axle clicking and a boot that's cracked and blowing grease everywhere, change it. This is the stuff that you don't typically see that you should be checking, because if you do not check it, I guarantee you it will fall off. Oh, there's a 720 to get to Steve. One thing we haven't talked about yet is what to do with shocks when it comes from season to season. So one thing that you want to check at least once a year, maybe not twice or 3 times a year as you start going to different terrains when it comes to shock, is nitrogen pressure. I would not recommend checking it to see what it is, because the fact that you checked it is going to drop it 20 pounds. I would literally just hit the shocks with 200 psi once a year and call it good. If it's not leaking, then you're typically leaking. If it's not leaking oil, then you're typically not losing any pressure. Steve.
I just want to be very specific on that, checking it with 200 pounds of nitrogen and using a regulator and the proper tools, not with air.
You
just
are
so
correct. I'm sorry, I said that.
No, just so we're very specific on that, because you do not want to put air in your reservoirs.
Yeah, so if you do not have a nitrogen bottle and the correct regulators and things to check it, then find a shop or a dealer of ours that does. Matt, you can tell everybody where the dealers are if they want to email you.
You can email dealers@shocktherapist.com and I will get back to you as soon as possible.
If you do not check that email, I guarantee you it is going to
Fall off.
That's right, like every other part on your vehicle. Make sure that all nitrogen is added with the shock fully extended or the tires off the ground. Nitrogen once a year, 200 psi. If you do not have a visible leak on the shaft or anywhere else, then you can run that shock for the next portion of the season. If you've driven the car and all of a sudden it went from not bottoming out to immediately bottoming out everywhere, you've got internal problems and you would address that with rebuilds on the shock. Let's recap. When you're changing seasons, and you're going from one area to the next, it's a really, really good idea to try and check your car. So check on most UTVs all the radius rod joints. That would be all of these guys right here. Jack the car up and shake the tire. See if any of this stuff is loose, replace it. Shake the tire front to back. You're going to see a tie rod on an X3 on a Polaris. You're just going to be able to check the wheel bearing by doing that. I would also check the brakes. That's a visual thing. Make sure you have enough pad left while you're there. In the front, you're going to shake everything around and find out if you've got bushing, upper and lower control arm issues. If you've got any kind of hub or brake issues, you can find that. You can also find all your steering issues. With the shocks on the vehicle, see if you've got leaks. If you don't have leaks, did it change drastically in the last trip or two where it was riding perfect and all of a sudden bottomed out everywhere? That's a good sign that you might want to have the shocks rebuilt. When you're going from sand to mountain stuff or trail, it's going to be a softer compression system. You want to check your ride heights. When you change from sand tires to off-road, you typically shouldn't be changing preload to go back and forth between tires because we give you different ride heights according to the tire height. But it's a good time to check it and make sure, because in the sand you may not have the toolbox in the back completely loaded with everything. You're not going to have a spare on it. So you go putting dirt tires on it and all of a sudden the thing sits really, or you put dirt tires on it, you put everything back in the chest, you got a spare tire on it again, all of a sudden the back of the car sits a little low. Time to adjust ride height. Change of oil, air cleaners, air filters, oil filters, change the belt. Check and blow out the clutch assembly, make sure there's nothing in there to worry about. If you have Yamaha, you don't have to worry about any clutch problems.
Too perfect.
You just have to worry about whether it's going to ride good enough to keep your dentures in. That's about the only thing you have to worry about there. Sorry, Steve. If you do not check everything on a Yamaha,
It will fall off.
that's right. So that's your basics. I know a lot of you guys are like, I know all that, but you know what? A lot of you guys don't. And I just want to stress to check everything as you're looking at it. Mitch.
General maintenance.
General maintenance. We do have a video on our YouTube channel if you guys want to go back, and it's XP Turbo or XP General Maintenance.
I think it's a general. I want to say it's a
one
general.
with
I might
logo?
be wrong.
Well,
though.
it's not a general, but it might be titled
The one with
XP,
logos and
yes,
XP
yes.
ones.
or
XPT.
General Maintenance.
Yeah.
And you guys can see Lauren giving you a heads up on all the basics that you should do on your UTV. It is specifically on a Polaris, but it can be translated into everything else on any UTV. Add to that maintenance video everything that we've shown you when it comes to hubs and radius rods and steering to check on all of those things. And again, if you don't check any of this stuff that we're talking about, I guarantee you it will
Fall off.
That's right.